After the Second World War, British drama underwent a dramatic transformation, one that broke away from polite conversation and elite drawing room settings. The stage became raw, real, and restless. In the 1950s and 60s, a new form called kitchen sink realism emerged, and this movement has been asked in exam. These plays depicted working-class domestic life, exploring poverty, class struggle, and social frustration, and yes, that focus on social issues too has been mentioned in exam. The movement reflected the changing moral and political mood of post-war Britain, giving voice to ordinary people who had long been ignored by the theatre. Leading this wave were the so-called angry young men, a phrase that has also been asked in exam. These were playwrights who challenged the artificial politeness of earlier drawing room comedies. Their works were filled with rebellion, bitterness, and humor that cut deep. Among them were John Osborne, Arnold Wesker, Sherlock Delaney, and John Arden, names that have appeared directly in exam. The defining play of this movement was John Osborne's Look Back in Anger, first performed in 1956, and that title has been asked in exam. It shocked audiences with its fierce language and emotional realism, giving a new kind of protagonist to British drama, a frustrated, working-class intellectual who rages against the world. Meanwhile, a very different revolution was happening through the theatre of the absurd. Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, staged in 1955, became a landmark in modern drama, and that play's date and influence have been tested in exam. Beckett's work explored the emptiness and absurdity of human existence, waiting, hoping, and doing nothing. His minimalist style inspired later playwrights, especially Harold Pinter, whose darkly comic works turned silence and uncertainty into art. Pinter's The Birthday Party, written in 1958, is a classic example, a play of menace, ambiguity, and psychological tension. That play, too, has been asked in exam. Pinter's subtle pauses and unfinished conversations became a new dramatic language altogether. Now, if we move to Tom Stoppard, we see a blend of Beckett's influence with intellectual wit and philosophical playfulness. His breakout work, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, written in 1966, reimagines Shakespeare's side characters as lost figures in an absurd world, and yes, that play has also appeared in exam. At the same time, the BBC Radio played a surprisingly major role in shaping modern drama, a fact that has been mentioned in exam. Since the 1920s, the BBC had commissioned and adapted plays for broadcast, giving playwrights a platform to experiment with dialogue, sound, and narrative form. It even launched the careers of major dramatists like Carol Churchill, whose first play aired on BBC Radio. You might recall Dylan Thomas's Under Milkwood, that brilliant radio play from 1954, also asked in exam. It captured Welsh village life in music-like language, proving that radio could be as poetic as stage drama. Similarly, Harold Pinter's A Slight Ache, broadcast in 1959, and Robert Bowles' A Man for All Seasons in 1954, both originated as radio works, and each of those has been asked in exam. Amidst these new voices, the older tradition of elegant, witty drama continued through figures like Noel Coward, whose name has been tested in exam. Coward was the master of high society wit, known for his flamboyance and personal charm. His 1941 play Blithe Spirit remains his best-known farce, combining a ghost story with drawing room comedy, and that play too has been asked in exam. Another important dramatist was Terence Rattigan, also mentioned in exam. Rattigan was a craftsman of the well-made play, often set among the upper middle class. His works, The Winslow Boy, the Browning version, The Deep Blue Sea, and Separate Tables reveal moral restraint, repression, and the hidden pain beneath polite manners. The Winslow Boy, written in 1946, has been asked in exam for its plot based on a real Edwardian case at the Royal Naval College in Osborne. Finally, we come to Christopher Fry, another major name from the same period, an English poet-playwright known for his verse dramas, and that description has been asked in exam. His masterpiece, The Ladies Not for Burning, written in 1948, made him a leading force in post-war theatre, and both the title and the date have been repeatedly asked in exam. The play begins with the mysterious disappearance of a rag and bone man, and after several twists, the supposed murder victim reappears, freeing the accused. That clever twist, the rag and bone man's return, is a key plot point noted in exam. Let's move into one of the most rebellious and socially charged movements in post-war British literature, the angry young men. This term refers to a group of British writers who emerged in the 1950s, voicing frustration against the established social and political order, and yes, that decade has been asked in exam. These writers scorned the traditional hierarchy of upper and middle classes, a detail also mentioned in exam. Most of them came from working class or lower middle class backgrounds. Another key point that has appeared in exam. They were educated at the so-called red brick universities institutions that served the new middle class rather than the old elite, or sometimes even at Oxford, but they strongly disliked the British class system and its elitist academic culture, which has also been tested in exam. The movement's anger was not just personal, it was deeply social. The writers criticized the failures of the post-war welfare state, which promised equality and progress but left many young people disillusioned. This criticism of the welfare state's unfulfilled dreams has been noted in exam, so do mark it carefully. The trend began with early novels like Hurry On Down by John Wayne and Lucky Jim by Kingsley Amis, both works that have been mentioned in exam. But the true hallmark of the movement came with John Osborne's play, Look Back in Anger, first performed in 1956, a fact repeatedly asked in exam. Osborne himself became the public face of the movement, widely described as an angry young man. At its heart, this movement was about rebellion, a protest against class distinctions, academic hypocrisy, and the moral emptiness of post-war Britain. The angry young men expressed their rage in sharp dialogue, satire, and realism, portraying everyday life not through high ideals but through frustration, humor, and sarcasm. Some of the key novelists included John Brain and Alan Sillitoe, both important names to remember for exam purposes. In the world of theatre, the key playwrights were Bernard Copps and Arnold Wesker, again often tested in exam. The movement was short-lived but powerful. By the early 1960s, it began to fade, much like the American Beat movement, and that comparison too has been asked in exam. A long list of writers is associated with this movement, and you should try to remember at least the major ones since they have appeared repeatedly in exam questions. Kingsley Amis, John Osborne, Harold Pinter, Alan Sillitoe, John Wayne, Edward Bond, Keith Waterhouse, Arnold Wesker, and Colin Wilson. Each of these writers, in his own way, represented the disillusioned, ironic, and restless spirit of a new post-war generation. Among the angry young men, Kingsley Amis stands out as a sharp observer of post-war British society. He was an English novelist, poet, critic, and teacher, known for his humor, intelligence, and biting satire. He wrote more than 20 novels and several volumes of poetry. Interestingly, he was also the father of the novelist Martin Amis, who later became a major literary figure in his own right. Kingsley Amis was a representative of the movement, a literary trend emphasizing clarity and realism, and that affiliation has been asked in exam. His poem, A Bookshop Idyll from 1956, includes the witty lines, "Should poets bicycle pump the human heart or squash it flat? Man's love is of man's life a thing apart. Girls aren't like that." These lines, too, have appeared in exam, so note them carefully. Amis's fame rests largely on his satirical comedies, which expose pretentiousness in both academia and middle-class life. His best-known novels include Lucky Jim from 1954, One Fat Englishman, Ending Up, Jake's Thing, and The Old Devils, that last one from 1986, which has been cited in exam. Now, let's focus briefly on Lucky Jim, since it's one of the movement's cornerstones and frequently tested. The novel centers on Jim Dixon, an anti-hero and a junior faculty member at a provincial university. This character and profession have been asked in exam. Dixon despises the pretentiousness of academic life and the snobbish behavior of his superiors. His constant rebellion against the well-born elite makes him a symbol of the frustrated post-war generation. Through humor and irony, Amis explores the class tensions, career struggles, and moral emptiness of a society obsessed with appearances. Lucky Jim perfectly captures the spirit of defiance and realism that defined the angry young men, making it a key text to remember for exam. So, whenever you come across this term, angry young men, think of a movement that gave a voice to post-war disillusionment, a movement that mocked the old class system, and one that dared to bring working class realism and youthful rebellion right into the heart of British literature.